in Philadelphia, talking to you, Krasner, that are seeing gun charges and letting guys out. Now, let's be clear. As a Second Amendment advocate and activist, I am extremely hard on crime, actual crime. That means it needs to produce a victim. Robberies, rapes, unjustified homicides, killings. When you get a guy that shoots somebody unjustifiably, I want him to have his due process. I want him to have a jury of his peers, and I want to hurry up and send him to jail. I want him to have his debt to society as well as the family or the estate that he needs to make whole. I want that to be full. Then I want him to get back outside as he's rehabbed to become a productive member of society. Those guys are in the minority. They're not the general public with the scenarios. Again, the example of Chicago. If I got 1,000 bad guys and they know they're going to be light on crime because I got the money for the lawyer, and we're not going to make them violent gun charges stick, of course, I have no recourse to not do it again. So the approach here is to make sure that those guys are held accountable. And on top of being held accountable, we got to set a precedent. The precedent is, if you use a firearm, I don't care if you're a convicted felon, you have a human right to defend your life. If you got your life together, what you were doing when you was doing the wrong thing outside, those guys still outside and they don't care that you got your right together. You have a human right to defend yourself. Where you lose me is when you use that firearm to be an unsafe and irresponsible firearm owner. You have a second chance at life. This entire place is built on redemption. We can't call ourselves Christians and say we are not in alignment with second chances.
So you believe capital punishment is not the way to go?
Depends on what that homicide, what that violation is. But
it's possible.
But I do think.
There you go. 2 days after taking on 4 armed robbers, Craig Cope is back at work at Norco Market and Liquor in California. The video showed a man in a ski mask walking into the store and pointing a gun at Cope, who's behind the counter. The owner then grabbed his own gun and fired at the alleged robber, who ran off. Officers say the suspect got into a getaway car outside with 3 other suspects.
I didn't have time to get free. It was all fast. I mean, literally from the time they got out of that car to where they came in was at most 10 seconds.
Police say one of the suspects was shot and later found at the hospital. After the shooting, the store owner suffered a small heart attack, but he's expected to be okay. Cope
under Georgia law, the same circumstances ought to require Chastain to allow guns, says Second Amendment attorney and activist John Monroe.
My analysis is that Live Nation does not have the authority to ban weapons at Chastain Park, and if someone chose to challenge it, they have a high likelihood of prevailing.
Monroe says concert venues required to allow firearms shouldn't have to cancel events, as Live Nation did with Music Midtown. But the question is whether a venue allowing firearms could get musicians to agree to appear in front of an armed audience, says musician and gun owner Jules Whisperling.
System, I think it's just dangerous to have that many people armed in one place. I can fully understand why a musician would not want to put himself center stage with a bunch of people who have guns.
Michael Bond says that the decision stems from Georgia's new gun law, which allows firearms in public spaces, including Piedmont Park. According to the festival's website, it states weapons of any kind are prohibited, but the state law supersedes any ability to enforce the festival's requirements.
This is a huge loss of, economic impact for, central, midtown, downtown, and Buckhead for sure.
We need all of the boosting that we can in the economy. That's money that vendors and people of all kinds, even entertainers, street entertainers, everybody get to make money when you have festivals like that. And when they cancel it, it trickles down for real.
Fox 5 is still waiting for the governor and the mayor to respond to the cancellation news.
Mostly communities that identify as men who have sex with men. The White House also previously confirmed that the virus primarily spreads among gay men. According to LGBTmap.org, New York and California both have a relatively high gay population compared to other states in the U.S. So far, less than 6,000 people have been afflicted with monkeypox in the United States. Around a quarter of those, or 1,400 cases, have been recorded in New York, and more than 800 in California.
A judge won't delay the trial of members of the right-wing Oath Keepers charged in the January 6th Capitol riot from fall to this next year. Lawyers for the group leader, Stuart Rhodes, argued that the ongoing January 6 hearings could taint a jury, and they don't have enough time to go through evidence recently uncovered by the committee. Rhodes and 4 co-defendants face seditious conspiracy charges for plotting to block the certification of Joe Biden's 2020 win. The rarely used charge from the Civil War era calls for up to 20 years in prison.
Violence. Police say a semi-truck driver spotted the woman driving the cart in the center lane. The truck driver used her semi to steer the golf cart driver to the shoulder, grabbing the keys as the woman tried to drive away. In their
manufacturing companies. More specifically, BitSight found that the trackers are used by a Fortune 50 energy company, one country's military in South America, a nuclear power plant operator, and a state in the eastern U.S.
That's all for today's China in Focus.
With all of the technical and procedural aspects of this, it's just a really important expression of our teamwork and our interoperability and our unity, really, as a group of nations that seek to continue to have a free and open Indo-Pacific.
The Indo-Pacific region has become the latest tug-of-war between the U.S. and China. The region supports more than 3 million American jobs. Plus, two-way trade between the U.S. and the region stands at over $2 trillion. It's also the source of nearly $900 billion in foreign direct investment in the United States. Beyond that, its location holds important military significance. The number of U.S. troops stationed there is higher than in any other region outside the U.S., and 6 countries there have nuclear weapons. The Chinese Communist regime has been increasingly assertive over its claim to virtually the entire South China Sea. To back that up, Beijing has been significantly increasing military activity in the Indo-Pacific region over the past 5 years. China likely sees this year's expanded drills as a threat. Chinese state media outlets have accused the U.S. of building an Indo-Pacific alliance similar to NATO to intentionally provoke conflict. The 2-week drills opened after China said it would conduct targeted military operations to, in its words, safeguard national sovereignty. The statement came in response to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Beijing claims the island as its own, though the communist regime has never ruled Taiwan. Let's take a closer look at the situation.
New Zealand's Prime Minister says she's willing to visit China to strengthen in-person connections. Right now, much of China remains under lockdown, but Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she looks forward to the return of in-person ministerial visits if restrictions ease. Ardern wants to have a dialogue on climate issues, as well as the trade and economic relationship between the two countries. She adds, New Zealand's relationship with Beijing is one of its most important and complex. Ardern says even though there were areas that matter deeply to New Zealand and that the two countries disagree on, New Zealand is willing to engage.
It would be wrong to characterize this engagement, including that of China, as new. It would also be wrong to position the Pacific in such a way that they have to pick sides. These are democratic nations with their own sovereign right to determine their foreign policy.
What?
Beyond that, she addressed
No.
China's influence in the Pacific. Beijing has been seeking to grow its influence in the Pacific. One of the most recent developments is the security pact with the Solomon Islands. Because of its close proximity to Australia, many in the West are
InfoWars host Alex Jones confronted at his Sandy Hook defamation trial. What plaintiff's attorneys asked him and his response. Pinning down the origin of the pandemic, that's what a hearing today was seeking to do. The focus, gain-of-function research.
The American people deserve to know how this pandemic started and to know if the NIH funded research that may have caused this pandemic.
A number of people who have quit the Chinese Communist Party has reached another milestone. Many decide to quit after learning of the regime's atrocities.
They said they'll let her go if she denied God. She refused.
Hall of Fame broadcaster Vin Scully passes away at age 94. The best baseball historian tells us what made him so great. And collided head-on with a car on a highway in Elkhart County, Indiana. 2 of her aides were also killed. Local authorities are currently investigating the crash. And in election news, Trump-backed candidates won primary races in a handful of states as voters in 5 states have narrowed down their party's nominees for governor, House, and Senate. And in Kansas, an abortion vote is sparking national attention. Here's NTV's Melina Weisskopf with more.
Unexpected results came out of the red state of Kansas with abortion access on the ballot. The majority of voters in the state say no to giving their state lawmakers the ability to restrict or ban abortions. The vote was the first of its kind in the nation since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Pro-abortion supporters are hopeful that it indicates a trend. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer used floor time today to express his prediction that this hints Democrats have a chance of keeping their majority in Congress this November.
What happened in Red, Kansas last night is a reflection of what is happening across the country and what will continue to occur through the November elections.
As for former President Trump's endorsement was once again put to the test in a few states. To take on Michigan's Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer, GOP voters in the state have chosen Trump-backed candidate Tudor Dixon.
I've talked about this at length about the 2020 election. It was unlike any election we'd ever seen, obviously, because of the pandemic.
Another win for the America First movement in Michigan's 3rd congressional district. Congressman Peter Meijer, one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump, will lose his House seat this November. John Gibbs, the GOP nominee, will now face Democrat opponent Hillary Scholten. But 2 other Republicans who defied Trump with an impeachment vote won their primaries in Washington, Representatives Dan Newhouse and Jamie Butler. And in Arizona, Trump-backed Carrie Lake is narrowly leading her opponent Karen Robeson, who is backed by Mike Pence. And for the state's Senate race, Blake Masters won the nomination to take on Democrat Senator Mark Kelly. Arizona is the most important state to look at from last night's primary results. This is one of the few swing states where Republicans have a chance of flipping the Senate seat and taking back the majority come November. But based on last night's primary results, current Democrat Senator Mark Kelly had about 200,000 more voters turn up